But I think I'm harping on this because of just how much it's simultaneously accepted to be sort of ambiguous in certain regards, and at the same time expected to be spectacular, expected to be something, right? Just our culture increasingly wants to be ambiguous, increasingly doesn't want to care, increasingly wants to just let everyone get what they want, kind of without anything mattering, and you still want these, these tentpole moments, still want these things that everyone gets excited about. And it just turned into such a mess. They've become such messes repeatedly, and right, it's like, I mentioned in the previous video versus me, someone in their 30s playing it, versus like a 16-year-old playing it, and realistically, like, I obviously the gaming demographic has grown up and it has become less male. Obviously, it's not. When I was a teenager, I definitely felt convinced that obviously people into their 20s and 30s played, but I was like, mostly it's young males play video games, and that's not even a little bit true anymore. So I do get that. I get that Cyberpunk 2077 wasn't made necessarily to be a killer app, wasn't necessarily made to be the game to get a large block of young male gamers possibly to play, the people who they're buying these things for, and it tries to service that diverse and older demographic, but in such, it just almost, it begs the question of why, or how can, the industry has eclipsed itself then, if it's such a common activity then. And that's happened to movies too, right? Like all these things that are like cultural tentpoles eclipse themselves, and then like obviously there's grassroots and home in movie. I don't know a lot about like amateur cinema, honestly. But in video games, obviously, there's indie gaming. There's amateur game dev is literally massive. So many people don't even like, who grew up loving gaming, live for gaming, but don't game. They're just like in game dev, which, but not, the company system is just fractured probably. But it is, even in so many ways, even like Cyberpunk 2077 is a single player game, and all these communities, right, are communities though, and there is, video gaming is a shared hobby, it's a shared interest, and it's also a cultural. I think maybe of note in Cyberpunk 2077, that's commendable, and I think honestly, as having not played that much of it, honestly, I think the I think there could be a more convincing suburbs of Night City. I mean, but isn't that part of the idea of that setting, right? And I think they do a kind of cool job of like the interstitial areas of that city are very cool, I think. The combining of the industrial, I think the industrial is very present in that, almost to the point where I think the game sort of is enthralled with its own industrial architecture, and maybe that is like the most central thesis of that game. Even like isn't the start screen is like in the junkyard, which is somewhat fateful, obviously, to like the story, but I think just repeatedly, and when you think about there being 3 beginnings, I think Nomad is like really the most like distinctive one, and those are definitely very indicative, and the Jackie Wells part, all very indicative of like what was cut or chopped, or like something was obviously like previously more expansive or something. It seems like they kind of had to fix a bunch of things to put it together to even start the game. And there's some really stringy use of like the objective, where it's like, go over the plan with this person, then walk over here, then go over the plan, then walk over here, then go over the plan, and it just, at this point in time, it's a little surprising that there isn't a larger storybook around what is even supposed to be a video game when that happens. But the question of the liminal is interesting to Cyberpunk. I guess it's not, when you're super committed to being online and then online again, or in their world, like being super jacked into these secondary and tertiary experiences. What exists in the space where everything is just turned off, what exists in just like the barren reality. And I think the nomad part of 77, I don't know, maybe narratively also, I didn't give it enough of a go. Maybe I just feel like it belongs, I don't know, or whatever. But I like that area, and I usually, when just like exploring, I think pretty quickly I would end up in like just the industrial areas, and I think those, what do they call it, visual storytelling. It's visual storytelling, most definitely. Like what is the cost of like running this giant hilarious like arcade of evil, and it does a good job of being like, it's all about one city, but it doesn't feel too like conceptual. The concept of the rest of the country and the world is like, it kind of fits, I guess. It's cool. Yeah, that's